Good afternoon and welcome to the Ecclesiastical Sewing Studio. My name is Carrie Roberts. I'm the owner and lead designer here at Ecclesiastical Sewing. And we're really excited to be bringing you our next collaborative project, the Sacred Heart Month project with the Bible marker. And we're collaborating with Clara from Clara Stitching. Ecclesiastical Sewing will be providing the information on making the Bible marker portion of the project, and Clara will be providing the gold work. The project, as you can see here, will include a free pattern handout. The pattern is for making a Bible marker. This is something that you can use for your own personal use at home, or you could make for use in your church or your center of worship. The pattern starts with 3 pieces. You can see here the tile layout. You can print this on your own printer at home, and the tile layout shows how to put the different pattern pieces together. The first piece is the main pattern piece. There'll be 4 pieces for each pattern piece, and you just tile these together. So it would be piece 1 of 1, 2 of 1, 3 of 1, and 4 of 1, and that makes the main face fabric, and that follows for the lining fabric and for the inner facing. Once you have your 3 pattern pieces put together, they'll look something like this. This will be the pattern piece for the main face fabric. This is the pattern piece number 2 is the piece for your lining fabric, and piece number 3 is the piece that we'll use for the heavy cotton or for the cotton canvas for the interfacing in the pieces. We'll be offering the Bible marker kit in 2 different fabric combination or 2 different fabric options. The regular kit will have the gold Fairford brocade. It'll have some ivory fabric for a lining and then the cotton canvas interfacing. There'll also be a piece of the ivory Fairford. It'll be a little bit bigger in your kit, big enough for you to put in a hoop or a frame to embroider for the Sacred Heart portion with Clara from Clara Stitching. And then there'll be some pieces of the dice braid for trim and some fringe and an iron-on cross. To begin the cutting for the main face fabric for your Bible marker, you'll notice that the Fairford brocade has a pattern down the center of the piece of fabric. To make sure your pattern gets lined up exactly on the center, what we're going to do is take your Bible marker, make sure it's, whoops, pardon me, I'm going to grab the right piece. Okay, grab piece number 1, that is for the face fabric. I'm going to take the pattern piece and I'm going to fold this in half and line up these edges just like this. And then once I've got this lined up, I'm going to take this and I'm going to place this fold directly on the center of the fabric so that the fold lines up in the middle of the pattern on the fabric. And then I'm just going to put some pins here to make sure that I've got it lined up on the center of the fabric. And then once I've got it lined up like that, then I'll just lay this out and then just pin the rest of the piece to the fabric. Then I'm just going to grab my scissors and then I'll just do some cutting around the outer edge of this. And after I finished cutting my face fabric, off camera I went ahead and I cut out the lining piece, so that's cut to size, and I also cut out the canvas interfacing, and that's already cut down to size. Okay, so the next piece that I'm going to prepare for my Bible marker is the orfrey band. The orfrey band I've already cut to height, and the finished height of this is 4.5 inches, and I've taken with my serger and I've already serged the upper and lower edges of that. And so now I'm ready to mark the a line on this so I can have a line to place my trim. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to take my gridded quilting ruler and I'm going to use a line that I can see and place that along this center line in the motif on my fabric. And so I'm going to get that lined up, and then I'm going to place that ruler so that the edge of the ruler about a scant 1/8 of an inch above where my serging is. And then I'm going to take my little chalk wheel and then just draw a chalk line on here. And then I'm going to turn it around, and then I'm going to repeat the same process on the opposite edge. Again, making sure my ruler is directly on the center line here, and then make a chalk mark about an 1/8 of an inch from that edge. And then after I've got those lines marked in place, then I'm going to take my dice braid and I'm going to place that along my chalk mark. And I'm going to turn this sideways And then I'm going to start placing pins to pin my dice braid in place. And I like to place the pins about a finger width apart along the line, and I'm pinning perpendicular. So the top of my pin is going through the top edge of my dice braid and the bottom is coming out through the bottom edge. I like to keep them perpendicular, and I like to keep my spacing fairly regular and even when I'm doing my pinning. And we have quite a few blog posts on our blog that show the creation of these orphrey bands. So if you want more information, hop over to our blog. And the pins that I'm using are very fine glass head pins, and so they're really easy and nice to work with. Okay, so I've got that pinned. Go ahead and pin on this other side and go ahead and get these sewn. When I do sew these on the machine, I do try to set my machine up so that I'm sewing and the sewing ends up to be right between the edge of the trim and where the little dice is in the middle of the trim. So I try to have my sewing end up being right about here in the middle of this area, right here with my stitching. I'm going to use a gold, probably a gold rayon, good color match for this. The rayon's a little bit shinier than normal sewing thread, and so it kind of blends in with the a little bit better. And so I'll go ahead and get them. We'll be back in just a moment. Okay. The next step in our band preparation is to add the little iron-on cross, or if you're doing the Sacred Heart project with Clara, then you'd already have your embroidery completed. With the iron-on cross, what we're going to do is line this up in the center of the fabric, matching the pattern motif, and then we're going to take a little ruler and then just make sure that we've got the distance even between the placement of the top and bottom. And so once we have that in place, I can go ahead and grab a little pin and we'll kind of hold this in place. Then I'm going to head over to the ironing board, and then I'm going to press this in place with the ironing board, and then off camera I'm going to go ahead and stitch the cross in place. Quickly use a monofilament on the top of the cross because the monofilament, it's a clear thread like fish line, and so the monofilament stitches very nicely on the top and kind of disappears into the cross, and then you'd use a matching gold thread on the back side in your bobbin. The next step with our Bible marker project is going to be stitching the dice braid to the fringe. To prepare the dice braid and the fringe, we're going to pin them together. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to take our dice braid, the bottom edge of our dice braid, and we're going to line it up with the bottom edge of the header on our fringe. So I'm going to lay the two together like this, making sure that the bottom edge of the dice braid lines up as perfectly as I can with the bottom edge of the header on the fringe. And we're going to get those lined up. And then when I pin, I'm going to pin through the bottom edge of the fringe header, and then I'm going to make sure that my pin comes out through the top edge of the dice braid here. Placing the pin perpendicular, that means it's going in the opposite of the dice braid. And I'm going to be pinning about a finger width apart and placing my next pin here. Kind of got to watch and keep your fingers out of the way when you're doing this. Okay, and so then we'll just continue like this. And then once we've got the pinning all complete, then we're going to take this over to the sewing machine, and just like we did when we were stitching the dice braid to the orphrey band, this time we're going to stitch the dice braid to the fringe. And our stitching, the first row of stitching to hold these two together, is going to be along this bottom edge right here. We're going to stitch again halfway between this the bottom of the dice braid and then where the dice is in the middle. So we're going to try to aim to hit right about in the center right here with our stitching. One thing that really helps is if you have an edge foot with your sewing machine, and you can run the edge of the foot right along here, and then if you can change the needle position to the right. We have Berninas in the studio, but we usually change the needle position so that it can bump over and then hit right here in the exact center where we want to do our stitching. And so we're going to go ahead and go off camera and get the two pieces stitched together. Okay, we're ready for the next step in our Bible marker project. We have some lines transferred from the pattern onto our face fabric, the placement mark for the orphrey band and the placement mark for the fringe. And so we're going to start by pinning the orphrey band to the Bible marker. I'm going to line up the bottom of the orphrey band with the placement mark on the fabric, and then I'm going to be careful to make sure I'm lining up the center of the fabric with the motif in the center of the orphrey band as well. And once I've got those things lined up, I'm going to go ahead and start pinning the pieces in place. I'm going to put some pins in and get the bottom edge kind of secured first. And I'm spacing these pins just a little bit further apart than when we were putting our dice braid onto the orphrey band. Okay, so I've got that finished, and I'm going to turn it around, and then I'm going to get this other side pinned in place. Okay, and I almost have this ready. And so now our orphrey band pinned in place, and so that's looking good. And so the next step is to go ahead and pin the fringe in place. And so again, I've got my placement line, and I'm going to line my fringe up here and leave a little bit of extra on either side. And I'll go ahead and start pinning this in place. And so actually I'm going to turn this around. I'm left-handed, so I'm gonna do it the way it works best for me. You might be pinning in an opposite direction. Okay, so I've got my center pin, and then I'm going to just pin to either side. And as I'm pinning this, I'm catching the top header of the dice, or the top edge of the dice braid, and then just getting that along the placement of the chalk line. Okay, go. So we've got pinned. Everything looks pretty straight and even. If you want to, you can grab your ruler and then just double check your placement and make sure you're even. Line your ruler up with the bottom of your dice, and then make sure it's aligned with the header of the fringe, and then you can adjust to make sure that things look nice and even. Comments, I usually like to leave a little bit of extra of the dice braid on either side. I don't like to cut it too close to the actual width of the fabric. Because of this woven process in the middle of the dice braid, if you cut it or trim it too close, you run the risk of some of these starting to pop out. And I don't have one in the studio right at the moment, but if you have a lighter or matches or something, or a candle in a flame, it's always a good idea to run the ends of these through a candle or a flame, and then that will create a little seal on it, on the edges of the fabric. It'll create like a little beaded seal, and then that helps prevent any fraying with these. We also like to do the same thing with the fringe, do just a little bit of that to seal the edges. So we're going to go ahead and get ready to stitch. Again, the stitching will be the same as when we applied the dice braid and the orphrey band. This time we'll be stitching just on this edge only, right here, and then the edge right here. So the bottom and the top edge of the dice braid will be stitched. When we're doing our fringe, we're going to go through this top edge only right here and stitch that by machine. And so we're going to go to the machine and get that stitching done, and then we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, we've got our sewing done, and now next step is to take the canvas for the inside of the Bible marker. The canvas acts as our interfacing. You can use a number of different things if you're doing this on your own. You can use a cotton canvas. You could use a Pellon fabric. We just would not recommend using a fusible interfacing. And so we've got our canvas included with your kit, and we're going to take our Bible cover face fabric and place that over our canvas piece. We're going to make sure the fringe is just slightly up from the edge here, and that our pattern ends up in the middle of our canvas piece. And then I'm going to grab a few pins and see if we can just put a few pins in place here. And maybe we'll just put one more pin up here. Okay, and then we're going to flip this and we're going to just recenter this just a little bit better at the upper edge here. Okay, and the next step that we're going to do to prepare for our lining is we're going to start folding the edge of the brocade over the edge of our canvas. And we're going to just put some pins in here just to kind of hold it. Okay. And then keep going to this other side here. And when we get to the point where the dice fringes, or the dice is here on the orphrey band, we're going to want to make sure that this comes across and this ends up perpendicular. That means it's at a right angle to the edge of our canvas. We don't want it going down like this are going up like this. We want it to come across in a nice right angle to the canvas. And then the same thing with our fringe. We want to make sure that our fringe is coming across at a nice perpendicular angle to our canvas. Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and pin the other side, and then we'll be back with you in just a moment. Okay, we've got our face fabric pinned to the canvas. Interface step is to prepare the piece for the lining. Before we do that, I just want to show you that we've got the sides pinned in place, and then we've also mitered the corners at the bottom and at the upper edge. Okay, so the next piece is to put lining in place. And what we're going to do with that is place the lining piece over the center of the fabric. And I kind of just make sure that I'm with my excess on either side. And then I'm going to go ahead and just put some pins along one side just to kind of hold the lining in place. Get ready to actually fold under the edge and pin on the opposite side. So I'm going to just throw some pins along this edge here. And then I'm going to go along up here and get some extra pins up here, and then one up here close to the top edge. And I'm going to put one down here near the hem. Okay, now that I have this side in place just as a holding stitch, I'm going to turn this around, and then I'm going to start working on this edge and actually fold the hem to where I want it to be to prepare for stitching. Do show the option of sewing one edge by machine first and then finishing the other end by hand, and you can certainly go ahead and do that. That would work really well if you have more of a plain fabric and you don't have a pattern that you're trying to get centered in the middle of the body. In this particular case, where we have a pattern motif that we wanted centered up the front of the Bible marker, like this one, the way I'm going to finish this is just to fold all of the edges and then just plan to do all of the finishing work by hand. Okay, and so now that I've got the edge in place, what I'm going to do is on this opposite side, I'm going to fold the fabric underneath, and I'm going to be working on having this be about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the canvas and the face. And so I'm going to start pinning my lining in place. And when I put my pins in, I'm going to make sure that my pins are parallel, going in the same direction as my Bible marker, and that the pins are even as far as spacing goes, and that they're about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the satin as I fold the. And I find, and the gals find, that the more accurate we are with the pinning, the faster and easier the hand sewing goes. And so we're going to keep pinning like this. And I'm keeping watch for little strings and so forth, and either we'll make sure that those are cut or that they're out of the way so that we don't have odd little strings showing. Okay, so I'm nearly finished with this portion here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish pinning down the length here, and then I'll also pin the other side, and then we'll come back on camera, and then we'll show you how we turn the ends and then how we deal with the fringe down here. Okay, so we're back, and you can see here that I've pinned the edges of our lining underneath, and so it's ready for hand sewing almost for that part. But we still have to deal with the hem at both the top edge of the Bible marker and at the hem with the fringe. So let's start at this end with the upper edge of the Bible marker, and let's get this turned underneath so that we're ready for hemming this. So you can see underneath I've got mitered corners pinned in place for the upper edge on the Bible marker. I'm going to just throw one more pin in right here for just a quick moment. Okay, and so the way that we're going to get this ready for the upper edge is that we're going to just kind of finger crease the edges of the satin, kind of making sure that that's going in the same direction as everything that's been pinned so far. And then we're going to just turn this edge underneath like this. And then we're going to match the end of the corner here with the edge over here of the miter. And then we'll just put a pin right here. And then this edge didn't want to quite go as it was, so we'll just kind of try to fold that in again a little bit here. And then maybe we just have to fuss with a little bit and I'm going to turn it around just a little bit here. Okay, so we'll just kind of fuss with that and pull it out just a little bit and get this other end tucked underneath. They do get a little fiddly sometimes, so it does take a little bit of work sometimes to get these to go exactly where you want them. They don't always go the very first time. There, that looks like that should be better. And so now we've got that where we want it to be, so that the edge of that comes up and just touches right at the edge of the miter here, and then maintains our 1/8 of an inch at the upper edge here. And so I'm going to get a couple of pins put in at this upper corner. There we go. And then I'm going to pin this upper edge and make sure that's even here. Okay? And there we go. So our upper edge is ready to pin, and I can go ahead and pull these extra pins out that are along the side. Okay, and I'll finish pulling the rest of the pins a little bit later on, but right now we're going to jump to this other edge where we've got to deal with the fringe for the miter down here. And so what I've done is I've divided the fringe where it's approximately 1/8 of an inch from the edge, where I've got part of it tucked in and underneath, and then the other part that's coming out. And what I want to do is I want to have this edge of the lining come directly along the edge of where this fringe is. I don't want to have part of the fringe tucked under and not coming even. So I want the fringe to be split exactly where the edge of the lining is going to be. And so I've got that in place, and then what I'm going to do is turn up the bottom edge here and just get it so that it matches again at the point of the miter. And then I'll put a pin on this side to kind of hold this in place. And then I'm going to go to this opposite side and do the same thing. I'm going to divide my fringe exactly where the fold line of the fabric will be, and then fold up the bottom hem of my lining so that that will hit right at the point of the miter here. And actually, I'm going to put one more little strand of the fringe underneath here. There, that's what I want there. Okay, and then I'm going to get a pin right here at this corner. Okay, and then I'm going to make sure all of the ends of the fringe, anything that's on the inside, any of the excess is tucked underneath so that nothing is sticking out here at the bottom edge. And then I'll put a pin right here at the very bottom edge. And then I'm going to add a few more pins over here at this side, right along here. Then I can pull some of these excess pins out here. Let's see, I've got one more pin kind of hiding. Oh, nope, that's this one here. Okay, let me get the rest of these out. And then we're going to flip it over and just see how it looks from the front side and make sure everything looks flat and smooth from the front side. Okay, so we've got the back pinned in place. We're going to check the front. That looks like it's in good shape, so I can pull out the pins here for the fringe and holding that in place. And I can pull out the pins in the center here. And everything looks like it's in good shape, and so then I can flip it over to the back side again, and it's ready for hand sewing. So the next step would be to find a nice thread to do your hand sewing with, and you're going to do just a blind stitch all the way around all 4 sides of your Bible marker project. And when you get that all done, then your project is complete. We hope that you've enjoyed this special Bible marker project that we've been working on. We're just very pleased to be able to bring this to you in collaboration with Clara from Clara's Stitching for Sacred Heart Month. Thanks again for following along, and we wish you blessings on your day.